And hello once again, everybody. Welcome to your Southern Oregon Sports Blog podcast. I'm Chris Phillips.
Jack Cosgrove.
Once again, we tried this about a couple weeks ago and had some technical difficulties, so hopefully we're going to get this one off the ground without any troubles. We're going to go ahead and start with do a quick little segment on the week that was, do a quick little review segment on last week, then move on to you, obviously the voice of the Crater Comets. We're going to focus on them this week. So we'll go ahead and move on to next week. Quick rundown across the state. Number 1 Jesuit looks very good. They're in an extremely strong position right now after beating defending state champion Central Catholic in week 1. And then they win a 61-55 double overtime barn burner against a really good Sheldon team you're doing 5, you're doing Crater.
Yep.
Who all those Southwest Conference teams are going to see. And Grants Pass saw this week 38-24. Sheldon took care of business, which actually you look at the yardage, you look at the ancillary stats in that game, closer than a 2-touchdown final would lead you to believe.
Yeah.
So Jesuit took care of business, 52-20 against Sunset. Number 2 West Lynn took out Lake Oswego, 42-14. Number 3 Sherwood, who Grants Pass got to see in week 1. Also looks very strong, really good team, balanced team, solid just about everywhere. Took out the other participant in last year's state championship game, Tigard, who is now off to an 0-3 start, coming off a state championship game appearance last year. So Tigard, they're not very happy right now. But Sherwood took care of them, 35-30. Then the other participant, Central Catholic, actually ended up coming back. They were down in that game and ended up coming back to beat Oregon City 21-20 in overtime. So they're now 1-2. They were staring 0-3 in the face as well. So, and just pick up Ashland 15-14 over Summit in what must have been a very good game down there at Walter A. Phillips Field in Ashland. So they hold on to their number 4 ranking in the state. So that's taking you across some of the big games in the state. Those are your top 5 participants. Obviously, number 4, we skipped them. Number 4 is Sheldon. We'll get to them just a little bit later, as they were at Grants Pass this last week. Let's go ahead and start with the North Medford Black Tornado visiting the Roseburg Indians. Roseburg jumped up 28-22 at half. They're really just a dominant running team. It's what they've always done. It's who they are. It's what they bring out every year. Roseburg, 404 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns on the game, all on the ground. Just 2 of 3 passing for 33 yards. So they only even attempted 3 passes, completed 2 of them. North, 212 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns on 33 carries, 9 of 15 for 112 yards, and a touchdown through the air. That ended up being a 36-35 victory for Roseburg in Roseburg over North Medford. So that's not how you want to start your conference schedule for the Black Tornado.
No, and you're kind of seeing it in the NFL too, how everybody kind of looks at last year's and how that finished. With especially Indianapolis right now, the Colts, everybody expected them. They got Andre Johnson, Frank Gore. North Medford lost some players, but they still had enough guys coming back that you thought that they'd really be a contender, and they still can. But it just shows the difference of what one season can make, because North Medford now sitting at 1-2 when you expected this team to come out of the gates pretty good.
Very strong. Sheldon, obviously, the team to watch in the conference. Everybody knew that coming in. They were. To lose at home to Grants Pass last year was a big loss for them, and one they definitely took out on the Cavemen this week. But some quick individuals to run down. Will Redicop and Kyle Rackley with 2 touchdowns each for the Roseburg Indians. Redicop also had that final touchdown. And love this name, quarterback Grant Ronk, the quarterback for the Indians, converted the 2-point conversion on that one that gave them that 36-35 victory over a heavily favored North Medford Black Tornado team. Move on to the game that I had the privilege of calling. Willamette at South Medford at Spiegelberg Stadium. South was up 21-0 at halftime, held on for a 21-14 victory. So they looked very good in the first half. Willamette really started to do some things there in the second half to make that game very, very close. South with 35 rushes, 189 yards, 2 touchdowns total, 13 of 23 passing, 149 yards, and a touchdown. Those are your 3 touchdowns for South Medford. Willamette, 53 rushes, 181 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Only 8 completions on 70 attempts and 70 yards through the air. Some individuals of note to give you some names here. Leading rushers for the South Medford Panthers were Christian Ibarra, not with 9 carries for 64 yards. And Jalen Parnell had 10 carries, 40 yards, and a touchdown. Willamette really leaned heavily on Trevor McDonald, who's just a sophomore. Young team there at Willamette. Also, young, both of these teams are really young. Playmakers all over the place for South Medford. Leading receivers for South, Chase Cota, 3 catches for 44 yards and a touchdown. Caleb Franklin, 5 catches for 32 yards. And the leading receiver for Willamette was Devin Gilman with 4 catches for 50 yards. Chase Cota, Caleb Franklin, Jalen Parnell, their quarterback, who I actually did not write his name down. I should have it on the...
Well, they've been switching off the first couple weeks between one of the younger guys.
Patterson's the one I'm thinking of.
So Robbie Patterson is the younger guy.
All sophomores. So that really bodes well for the future for South Medford. There are lots of really top-quality playmakers, thin team, not deep, and young. Obviously, all these guys just sophomores.
Yeah.
But and usually that kind of lack of roster depth where it really hurts you is on the lines.
Well, South Medford, like you were saying, they're extremely young. I think that they're still about a year of experience away from really being a contender and having everybody just scared to come into South Medford, come into Spiegelberg, or to invite this South Medford team up to their field. But like you were saying, this team, if they can get clicking and they can get the experience, which obviously they got some last year with all the injuries, so that's why Caleb was able to step up. Obviously, Chase Cota is Chase Cota. He's NFL bred.
He's the one everybody's gonna key on. It really opens up some opportunities for Parnell and Franklin, especially and on the outside, because they're gonna focus on the name.
And they have
and he's legitimately good to back it up.
You have to take advantage of that too, because a lot like when you play a Calvin Johnson or something like that, where you're going to get safety help automatically over the back and you're going to have corners bailing, you have to take advantage. You have to run shorter routes to bring the corner up so you can beat them deep. And I think Coach Singler's smart enough to know, yes, I have something legitimate over here, but let's not key in on him as much. Let's get him the ball when we can, but let's also get it into the hands of our other playmakers.
Right, and they haven't really used him as a running back, at least in what I've seen. He's strictly a wide receiver, guy who runs good routes, has good hands, solid guy. Let's go ahead and move on to Sheldon at Grants Pass. Sheldon took care of business in that one, 38-24. Give you a quick rundown on the stats there. Sheldon with 23 rushes on the ground, 109 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Quarterback Justin Herbert was actually 18 for 28 with 290 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. The Cavemen piled up 130 yards on 52 rushes for the 2 touchdowns. And we're quarterback Dylan Hanley, 15 of 26 for 212 yards and 1 touchdown through the air. Statistics actually say, the ancillary statistics say this game was a lot closer than that 2-touchdown final might lead you to believe. Some quick individual statistics. Leading rushers for Sheldon was Maseke Fuaiva Thompson, 14 rushes, 76 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jake Stoffel doing the heavy lifting for the Cavemen, 24 rushes, 83 yards on the ground for him. Leading receivers were Cameron Wong for Sheldon, 4 catches for 107 yards. And the big play man for the Cavemen was Caden Lopez, 7 catches, 121 yards, and a touchdown for him. Good test for both of these teams. Sheldon going at Grants Pass. It's a revenge game for them after losing last year at home. And they continue to look really, really strong, coming off that loss to Jesuit last week. So they're really going to take it to this conference this year. They look very, very good. But also a good test for Grants Pass, replacing a ton of senior leadership from last year. Almost all their big playmakers from last year were seniors from an undefeated conference schedule and a trip to the state quarterfinals. So enough that they can at least compete. And then you lose your quarterback, Easton Benson, week 1. So this is a Grants Pass team that can at least prove that they can compete against the upper echelon of teams, which bodes well once they get into the meat of back-to-back weeks with South Medford and North Medford, both in Spiegelberg.
Yeah, and traveling into Spiegelberg is always it's a task, man, because Spiegelberg, a lot of weird. I've played, not just high school, but a lot of semi-pro games in Spiegelberg, and Spiegelberg has a lot of weird things that happens at it. Balls, bounce a certain way.
Really?
Catches are made that shouldn't be caught. Guys don't go down that usually go down. So I've seen a lot of spectacular things happen at Spiegelberg Stadium. So just the aura and all the winning and the tradition that's gone on there, that it's intimidating to walk in. First of all, a lot of schools don't have stadiums.
Right.
Spiegelberg is a legitimate stadium, so it's big, and it gets rocking, and the noise actually stays inside the stadium because it reflects off the other side.
Right.
So it's a really, really, really fun place to play if you're ready for it. If you're ready for that big feel, if you're ready for the college type atmosphere, it's fun to play in, and there's no better stadium in my opinion in the state of Oregon. If you're not ready for that and you're just coming in and you're kind of it's not a fun place to play.
Speaking of weird things at Spiegel, we had our first drone delay of the season on Friday night.
Joe
Officials, not us. Jesse Douglas would want us to say that. It was not Table Rock Sports that had anything to do with that. They stopped the game.
Yep.
And we had no idea why. Everybody was all of a sudden, they empty the field. It's a new OSAA rule for this year. They clear the field, and everybody's just sort of looking up. Not a cloud in the sky. The first thing that came to mind was lightning. Was there lightning? Or because everybody starts looking up, and that's the only thing where they clear the field. Yeah, is if they see lightning. And so it was just, and then all of a sudden you see two little flashing red and green lights up over the home side bleachers, and it just sort of starts floating over the field, and then it goes back, and it was about 10 minutes. Yeah, about 10 minutes there before they got that one to the ground. So the one we left till last. The reason you're here, Crater at Mountain View, 41-37. Yep. I'll go ahead and let you take the lead on this one.
Well, Crater went into Bend to play Mountain View on a two-game win streak. This is actually the best season that Crater's had since 2010, 2011. So it's been some time since Crater was a legitimate contender, even in 5A. And, I mean, right off the bat, they got smacked in the teeth by Mike Irwin. Mike Irwin is their quarterback. He is just a junior this year. 3 minutes into the game, he breaks off a 38-yard run. So you knew, especially last week when they had Paradise, California come up to Crater and play against them, that running was really, really an issue for Crater. Okay. Because they just gave up a ton of rushing yards. And what they did last week was they gave it up for about 2.5 quarters, almost 3 full quarters of, bend. But
started to shut it down.
And then it started to turn into like the bend but don't break defense, where they gave up a ton of yards, but they didn't give up many points. And then
always a tricky balancing act.
And then they shut it down completely. And it was kind of the same thing here. Mountain View scores the first one, kicks off to Crater. Crater's on a great march to tie it up, and there's a fumbled snap between Struck and Kevin Gillespie. Okay. Mountain View takes over, scores again. So it's 14-0. Right. Boom. Last week against Paradise, Crater started out 14-0. Okay. And they ended up going into halftime trailing. Sure. So one of the big things that happened for Crater was, one, the kicker for Mountain View missed 3 field goals. Ooh. Which that's the difference in the game.
That's the game, right.
But, once again, it comes down to 2 names, if you really want to break it down that way. And that's Kevin Gillespie, who last week scored the game-winning touchdown, and once again this week scores the game-winning touchdown because he had a receiving touchdown and 3 rushing touchdowns. He's sensational on defense. He does everything. He doesn't come off the field ever. He plays special teams.
Loves those kids.
Yeah, and in high school you're allowed to do that. Right. So I'm really interested to see what college is going to take him on and what they're going to take him on for. Are you playing linebacker? What they're going to
see him moving right.
Yeah, and then of course the leadership of Matt Struck. Matt Struck, when things weren't going right, he calmed all his guys down, kept them on the straight and narrow, made sure that everything was going to go good. And it wasn't just Gillespie who took over the game. Like I was just saying, Struck only completed
12
passes.
Right.
But 350 yards, so that's 29 yards per completion. And his big guy was Day.
6 catches, so averaged a little over 31 yards, 6 catches for 189 yards on the night, so a little over 30 yards of reception for him.
And that's what they can do, Crater has so many weapons on the outside, plus in the backfield, that they can pick you apart. So if you're stacking the line to stop Gillespie, he's going to dump it, open, and he's got not just size in Jake Ireland, but he has legitimate speed with 3, if not 4 of his receivers that will beat you one-on-one, and they run a lot of great combo routes. And what it does is it makes you choose. Okay, am I going to stop the quick slant, or am I going to go deep? Because if you don't stop the quick slant, he's picking up a ton of yards after the catch. And if you come up on that, he's going over the top to Jake Ireland. And
you're saying they run a lot of stack receivers, a lot of things they do, trips to one side, a lot of things they do to confuse the coverage for the defense. So a lot of things, and those can be really difficult for high school kids to keep up on.
Exactly.
Which is my guy. Assignment football like that can be really difficult for guys who haven't been playing the game for 8, 10, 12 years.
And that's what John Beck is really, really good at. Even, when I played against him when I went to South, we called him the Mad Hatter this week because he is really, really good at exploiting mismatches. So he will set things up and put people in motion just to see who's moving. And it's kind of like in basketball, how you set down screens to try and get people to switch off on people and create mismatches.
Sure.
He does a lot of that himself, to where he'll put people on the line and make them say, okay, well, what do I do if he comes into my zone? Do I take him? Or if they both come in, what are we doing?
Right.
And they're quick at it.
Right.
So they just get up and go.
Right. The offensive players know where they're going.
Yep.
They know what's happening. They know what they're doing. It's the defense that has to react and then come up and make plays on the ball.
And just when you think you have it figured out, Matt Struck is also extremely good at reading the defense, and he'll pull the ball himself and take it. And that's one of the ways that they scored, was Matt Struck took it upon himself, and he had a nice little rush for a touchdown. Had to be close to 40 yards, and it's just because they were not paying attention to him.
Right.
They were so focused on Kevin and all the receivers on the outside.
You have to divide your attention so much, it makes it really difficult to keep track. I got to cover this guy, this guy, this guy.
Yep.
The guy with the ball actually gets lost.
So the 3 defensive players for Crater this week that really stood out, Shea Hall was all over the field. He was making big hit after big hit, covering, the receivers coming in, making tackles in the backfield, just taking on the running backs. So obviously he had a huge game. Jesse Merritt again.
Yeah.
Jesse Merritt is going to be their big hit guy.
Yeah, that's a name you've mentioned before.
Yeah, he is. He's just a nasty. He's what you want in a linebacker. He's stout. He's tight packed. He's aggressive. He's a sure tackler, and he'll pop you.
Yeah.
And then the third one obviously is Kevin Gillespie.
Okay.
Because he plays right next to Jesse, and they're both just all over the field. So their defense is extremely good, but they give up too much. And we started kind of talking about the cardiac comets.
Okay.
Kind of like the Panthers, back when they played New England, where they would let teams go up, and then they'd crawl back and then win the game.
Right.
And they're playing with fire because they're 3-0 right now.
Right.
But when you get into playing Ashland and you get into playing some of your conference people, you're not going to have the chance to crawl back.
Especially a very good Ashland team, especially. It's highly ranked. Going to be a really terrific game. All right, we're going to call that part 1.
Yep.
Take a little break here. We'll be back in just a minute with part 2. So that was our week that was. Look at what happened last week. We'll take a break, and we'll be back with part 2, which will be looking forward in the week that will be. Thanks for tuning in, and we will be back right after this.